Boker Tov, Talmudim. It's time for a Heartfelt Haftarah once again. And I'm sitting here in our frosted over synagogue. Obviously, I'm recording during this fabulous bout of cold temperatures and ice that has forced most of us to stay at home. But here I am, risking life and limb for you in order to be able to record this Heartfelt Haftarah. So where are we? Where are we? We are in the parasha Yitro in the book of Exodus. We have come out of the great drama of our liberation from Egypt, and now we are going on to the second of three climatic moments that happen in the book of Exodus. It's just mind-blowing, all the amazing things that are happening to us. So what's this particular climatic event? It is the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. Now, okay. We are in the tent peg phase. Of course, one of the questions that is unresolvable, is always discussed, was the entire Torah given at Mount Sinai? Was part of it given at Mount Sinai and the rest of it given over the 40 years? Or is it, as modern scholars suggest, that what we have today of the narrative of the Torah is a construction from later periods, and that in fact the entire 5 books were composed over the course of hundreds of years? I'm of the hundreds of years guy, but that's not really why we're here. What we're here to talk about is our Haftarah, which is the book of Isaiah, Isaiah chapter 6. So what 10 peg things can I tell you about the prophet Isaiah? The prophet Isaiah lived in the second half of the 8th century BCE, before the Common Era. I think I've already told you that the whole book is perceived by modern scholarship to be the work of 2 and possibly 3 distinct authors. So be it. We're dealing with, in this particular passage, first Isaiah, the earliest Isaiah, again, as I said, second half of the 8th century BCE. He lives in the southern kingdom, as is characteristic of most of the southern kingdom prophets. He is also a priest, and that is important for understanding the occasion that we're going to be hearing about, because just as our Torah portion talks about a revelation, so our Haftarah talks about a revelation, or a theophany, a revelation of God himself or herself. So anyway, Isaiah, what's happening in his world? Well, the northern kingdom has still continues to exist, but is threatened by other forces. And at least in part of Isaiah's lifetime, the northern kingdom attempts to subdue the southern kingdom. And this leads to one of the most important passages in Isaiah that we're not going to talk about today. But in any case, it's a time of international tumult. The southern kingdom is also looking to Egypt to help secure its own boundaries, much in the same way that Ukraine has turned to the United States and NATO to help it assure its borders. And internally, what Isaiah is seeing is a rise of new idolatry, especially among the wealthy class. It's just considered hip and cool to be maintaining shrines to multiple gods. And Isaiah is very upset about this, apparently upset enough that God picks him out, which not an honor that you always want to have God come to God's attention in a way you don't intend. And that's how it happens to most prophets. So Our Haftarah portion, we're going to put away our tent peg. Our Haftarah portion is Isaiah 6, and it is the summons that God gives to Isaiah to become a prophet and speak on God's behalf. It happens in chapter 6. Rashi is sure that this is out of order, and it should be at the very beginning. I think it's a very plausible argument from a more modern compositional point of view. We would probably like to start at the beginning and hear about Isaiah's summons. But in any case, it appears in chapter 6, and it is a remarkable and very interesting description. So let me pull some of this up for you and let you hear what's going on. It's beautiful, and probably the most famous thing that comes out of this is the Kedusha, the prayer we say on Saturday mornings, where we all go, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzavot, Melochol Haaretz Kevodo. Well, that line, Kadosh, 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 comes directly from this portion. So let me share it with you. So here we go. All right. Now, Isaiah's mission extends over several kings, both Uzziah and Ahaz. So here we go. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw my liege, my Lord, Lord the way we would use it in the God sense, seated upon a throne, high and exalted, with a robe whose train filled the temple. And seraphim stood about, each with 6 wings. 2 covered the face, 2 covered the body, and 2 to fly. And each called to the other, Holy, holy, holy is the God of heaven's hosts, whose presence fills all the world. And at the sound of the call, the foundations of the temple shook and filled with smoke. Woe is I said, I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Now, what will happen here in just a moment is that, in fact, a supernatural event will happen. One of the one of the fiery angels, that's what seraphim means, fiery angels, will come with tongs, temple tongs, and place a coal, a burning coal, on the lips of this unclean priest, and he will have himself metaphysically purified, become a offering to God, as it were, and he now is commissioned to be able to speak on God's behalf. Okay, so let's go through this. First of all, I want to point out the very subtle and very clever style of this. So on one level, he's having a fantastical vision of the God of Israel seated upon his throne in the temple. Now, understand that as he's telling this, there is a kind of two-path reading of this. If you want to be supernatural about it, you can be supernatural. If you want to read it more naturalistically, you can read it more naturalistically. So let's begin with the fact that the Ark of the Covenant, which sat inside the Holy of Holies, was in fact intended to be a physical representation of God's throne on high, with the cherubim on top who form the seat of mercy, where the God of Israel would theoretically sit and from which he would speak. So when he says, I see God upon his throne, he could be referring to the Ark of the Covenant, or he could be having a truly, truly sublime vision. And then he goes on to say that his robe fills the sanctuary. Now, again, this could be an incredibly glorious, splendiferous, amazing, more mind-boggling than a Liberace show kind of experience. But in fact, he may also be suggesting that he's making a metaphor out of the veil that hangs over the Holy of Holies. There's a very large veil that separates the sanctuary from the Holy of Holies. And so that may be the robe of God. And then he goes on and he talks about these seraphim, these creatures with 6 wings. Of course, right there in the temple at this very moment, as he's standing there in a very mundane way, there is, in fact, menorahs, 6 with a center pillar, 6 lamps coming off of it, and a center lamp, and maybe what he's describing as a 6-winged angel is, in fact, a reification, a personification of those menorahs that are hanging there burning. All right. And of course, there's coals burning on the incense altar, and it describes smoke surrounding God. That could be the incense. So it's a very clever literary piece, which claims to put a supernal cast on what could be described as the mundane objects that the priest was seeing in the space where he was when he witnessed God. So very subtle, very imaginative, very literary. So I want to share this with you. So this is meant to parallel the appearance of God on Mount Sinai. Instead of appearing on Mount Sinai, God is appearing on Mount Zion, which is where the temple is built. This manifestation is extraordinary to Isaiah, and he feels wholly inadequate in the presence of God. And he speaks of having unclean lips and being of a people of unclean lips. God performs this kind of gracious purification through fire, which any priest could understand. And then God says something absolutely extraordinary. He talks about his people and how they need, he needs to communicate a message. And he says, who will go for me? Who can we send? We being the angelic court, as he speaks. And Isaiah, overwhelmed, but with renewed confidence in himself, says, I can. Here I am. Send me. Right? So suddenly he embraces his prophetic command, as we as Jews are asked on a regular basis, often in uncomfortable circumstances, to affirm our Jewish identity. So it's an absolutely extraordinary passage. It's wonderful piece to accompany the story of our receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai. And, you know, our commentators do get some interesting tidbits out of all of this, aside from the fact that the words of the seraphim become part of our liturgy, the chief of which is the midrash that says Isaiah went too far. God almost gave up on him as a prophet, because he said, I am a man of unclean lips, which is fine. You can say whatever you want about yourself. I am of a people of unclean lips. And the midrash says, that's wrong. God wants someone who's going to stand up for the people Israel, not someone who's going to start out by saying by dissing them and trash talking them and things like this. But he got over that. God got over that, and he was able to go forward. And in fact, we will later see that the prophet Isaiah will, even as he's expressing condemnation of different practices, also come to the defense of the people Israel periodically in his oracles. So a fantastic moment, a moment so important that it's enshrined in our liturgy. And I think it's a great haftarah to go with our Torah portion. It's definitely the spiritual hot fudge to go on top of the wonderful vanilla ice cream that is our Torah portion. So that's it for this week. Thank you all for listening in, and I look forward to talking with you next week.